All right, well, this is super. I got a couple of extra minutes here, which is good. It's really been an awesome afternoon, and it's really been great for me to have this conversation about philosophy, which you really don't see a lot in conferences. And I've talked about the obligation at a couple of conferences this year, and it's really been singular on the agendas. I am Steve Wolfe. I work for the company I work for is SpaceCom. We're mounting a major commercial space conference in Houston in November. I'm not here representing them. A couple of years ago, I wrote The Obligation, which fortunately I was fortunately, even though Bob Zubrin read the book, he still invited me to come and speak here this week. And he was also kind enough to write this blurb where he says that The Obligation is a fascinating novel of ideas that dramatically recasts the reasons underlying humanity's need to reach for space. I highly recommend it to anyone looking for a thought-provoking read. What I'm going to be talking about today is a new way of looking at humanity and our relationship to the Earth, our relationship to the cosmos, that perhaps you haven't heard put in this particular perspective. So I certainly encourage you all to approach this material with an open mind, and I look forward to your comments and thoughts afterwards, especially in the context of the other philosophical discussions that we've had here today. So I'm very, very excited about that. I did want to make mention that the Journal of Space Philosophy was mentioned as an online publication, and just in the course of this afternoon, I just got an email from Bob Crone, who's the editor-in-chief of that magazine, to let us know that the latest issue is now available. And so I encourage you to Google the Journal of Space Philosophy, and you'll see the latest issue. I have an article in there which actually tracks closely to what some of the information I'll be covering today. So let me just start with a story. I appreciate the fact that you guys are here. I'm the last speaker standing for the afternoon. I know we have an evening program, but I want to start with a story. This particular the information I'm conveying here today is somewhat personal, but let me start with a story about a trip that I took with my wife back in 1987. Shortly after we were married, we decided, it was around Christmas time, and we decided to take a road trip to visit my parents in Florida, Deerfield Beach. We drove down for the 20 hours from DC, and we had a good time. But it was really on that ride back, we decided just to sort of push it through, like sometimes you do. Let's just drive through the night and just get back home. And it's on those long drives, especially if you're alone, where it's a great opportunity to sort of reflect on things that are going on in your life, what you're doing. It was a change of a year for me. I had just read Frank White's book, had just come out, The Overview Effect, which was mentioned here earlier. He's one of the leading philosophers of space. And I was thinking about, well, what mark am I going to leave on Congress before I leave? You see, I had been working on Capitol Hill for about 4 years, and I knew that I wasn't going to be there for much longer. And I really wanted to make a mark that reflected my passion for the human evolution into space, for my passion for the idea that humankind was on a path to evolve beyond Earth and I wanted to play a part in that. So, I was driving probably around the Carolinas, and I was thinking, well, I can't just write a piece of legislation that says, okay, NASA, go and build a space colony. I mean, that's not going to happen. But thinking about it, I said, well, maybe if we acknowledged, if there was an acknowledgement that everything that we were doing with our human space program was leading us eventually to space settlement, and that activity and that eventuality was a good thing for the country and for the world. Just the language, if we could do that, that would be something. And I got back to Washington. I drafted a bill that I had no expectation my boss was going to introduce, but he did, against the objections of some of my more conservative colleagues in the office. And long story short, we let's see here, if I could do this, and what if I do that? Okay. At the end of 1988, as part of the NASA authorization bill, there was a section in there called space settlement, and essentially it said that Congress declares that the extension of human life beyond Earth's atmosphere, leading ultimately to the establishment of space settlement, will fulfill the purposes of advancing science exploration, development, and will enhance the general welfare. As far as I know, I do know, this is the first and only time that legislation or that space settlement appears in U.S. code. Now, there is another initiative that we've started this year to revamp. I'm going to talk about the history of this particular legislation, but more importantly, about a new initiative that is going to build off of this legislation tomorrow. So hopefully we'll see you there. But I'm talking about this in the context of this philosophical discussion. And I want to, because this is important because it had to do with the process that I went through to arrive at this. It was responding to what I believe was an evolutionary impulse, a feeling that something has to happen. We have to make a difference. And so in my opinion, a philosophy that doesn't have embedded in it a impetus or a motivation towards action, is a philosophy that's okay, but we really want it to mean something. We really want it to motivate action. So it's the big question, but for me, at one point in my life, I'm jumping ahead a number of years, the beginning part of the aughts. It was actually, and periodically actually over the years, because you ask yourself, why am I so interested in space? Why am I so interested in human settlement to space? I mean, how many here are excited about the idea of human settlement? I'm not just talking about getting to Mars. We're talking about actually, setting up a colony and all that good stuff that we've been talking about throughout this conference. There's a certain, there's certain juice in that to us that we just can't let go of. It's kind of, bubbles up from the inside of us, and it forces us to take action. I was really struggling or very interested. Why am I so interested, and why are other folks in the space industry so darn interested in this? And it was after quite a while of repeatedly asking myself this question, there came an evening in a hotel room where I was once again, for the umpteenth time considering this question, when suddenly, this came to me. So the humanity, from the very dawn of its existence on this planet, was always always destined to carry the seeds of life to other planetary shores, that is our obligation to the world that gave us life. That is the essence. I don't know, has anybody here by any chance read The Obligation? Okay, so this is the end of the book. So so sorry for ruining it for you. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. But essentially, it's this idea that, wait a second here, maybe it's not just sort of a happenstance sequence of accidents of evolution that sort of made us interested in looking up, that are all sort of linked to sort of survival mechanisms that suddenly we're at this brink of building settlements in space. Maybe, just maybe, there's a deterministic element to this that's been unfolding for 50,000 years. I'm already getting hands raised. So it starts with the world Gaia, right? So everyone's familiar with the Gaia Hypothesis, which is, that the world is a singular living entity with all of its constituent species and systems and so forth. Well, if we consider that Gaia is a living organism, it's a living organism that has, and all of its constituent species have the ability to thrive and reproduce and so forth. Why should it be any different? Perhaps, we see in nature mechanisms all the time where organisms are reproducing and thriving and spreading in all sorts of ways that you would never think they would be able to do. Perhaps there's a mechanism here that we can't quite understand that's taking place, that we're involved in, but we're not even aware of it, that we're participating in, that's going to allow this organism to reproduce itself. I mean, if this were to be the case, if Gaia was a living organism, it would need the ability to fashion seed pods and send those seed pods out into space to find other fertile places to stay, to take root. And in this, and ultimately, the agent, there needed to arise within Gaia an agent to facilitate this, and that of course is us. Another way of looking at this is a metaphor I like is the bumblebee, because the bumblebee is going about its business, collecting honey and building hives and doing all the things it wants to do, and collecting pollen. Oh, isn't this great? I'm collecting pollen. It's not aware of the absolutely essential role that it's playing within the ecosystem and to keep the ecosystem alive. I mean, in many ways, that's like humanity. We've been going about our business, thriving throughout the millennia, and doing what we do, and we are reaching this point where we're about to fulfill this particular obligation. Now, if this were true, and this was part of the follow-up thought exercise that I was doing to say, well, if indeed this was true, then what is it about humans, about who we are, that is an indication, that indicates clearly that this is the particular role that we have? And it comes down to, what are the traits that we have? And then I call these endowments. And so we would have to be a wanderer, right? Someone who would interested in wandering beyond the planet. Well, we are wanderers, of course. The great migration from the plains of Africa, where we wandered to every place on the planet and made settlements. So we are the wanderer. We're also a settler. We're very good at separating ourselves from nature. And so that's a key dimension of who we are, right? We're in this atmosphere-controlled habitat right now, right? I mean, everywhere we go, we are separated from nature, and that's an important dimension. If we're going to go beyond Earth, we need to be comfortable being separated from nature, and that causes issues with the environment. But we could talk about that. I'll talk about that in a minute. We have to be an inventor. We've got to, starting from the first stone knife. The guy that said, maybe I can make this knife. This stone, if I give this stone a little edge, it'll help me to carve the skin off of this carcass. And that will be easier for me. So the problem solver, all the way up to solving the problems that we need for propulsion. We're also the builder. So we're not only inventing, but we're very good at taking those inventions and repeating them over and over and over again. And that's how society is built, right? We're taking these things, we're building houses over and over again. So that's how we're creating. And as more and more of our, as we build, we continue to go further. We're also the visionary, right? So it's Arthur C. Clarke, but it's the part of us or the individuals within our culture who are looking, who are able to look down the road. They're able to see the very big picture. So not just inventing or problem solving. So it's really seeing the big picture. The pharaohs that said, we can build this pyramid, or we could build this cathedral, right? And then we're also the protector, which is very important. It's not only about building the Great Wall of China, but it's also about making sure that everything that we've accomplished in civilization so far is protected. It's the librarians, it's the obviously it's the emergency response responders and so forth to keep it all. And this is an important aspect of who we are, so we can keep that ongoingness of who we are. So those are what I call 6 endowments. This set of features not only allowed us to thrive and over the course of the millennia, 50,000 years and more, but they have also allowed us to come to where we are today in terms of without these endowments, we would not be able to even think about leaving Earth and certainly not colonizing other planets. So I think that the idea that we left the garden, or kicked out of the garden, well, I think this creation story, is really that we needed to leave the garden. We needed to leave the garden so that we could do what we needed to do to develop the technologies in an iterative way over many thousands of years so that we could fulfill this particular organic responsibility. And I think Frank White put it very well. The purpose of human space exploration cannot be found in human desires and ambitions alone, but must be viewed as a phenomenon actively encouraged by universal forces. So that's sort of the story, I think, of where we are in terms of the relationship to the planet. But I think that there's really another dimension to this too, because it's really not just about this world. It's really about us within a context of the entire universe. And Carl Sagan put it nicely: our obligation to survive and flourish is owed not just to ourselves, but also to the cosmos, ancient and vast, from which we come or spring. So it really does. So the story that I'm talking about is really linked very much to the very beginning of the creation of the universe. It's we could look at this as that there's within the fiber of the universe there is a sort of there is informational coding that says that the galaxies, stars, and planets will come into being and be formed according to a certain set of probabilities. And I think within that context, worlds would, a life would emerge on worlds, and those worlds and the life that emerges on those worlds would achieve the level of sentience that we have, and then there would be an impetus then for us to expand outward from those worlds and expand that consciousness out beyond those initial host worlds. I mentioned there's a lot more in my book. I definitely encourage you. They're for sale, and so books are on the table out there. I definitely encourage you to take a look at this. But there's another dimension though that I touch on, and it's really another endowment, one that's emerging. Because one of the questions that we come up with, and I think we struggle with as in the space community in general, is, well, if this is really the raison d'etre for humanity, or if colonizing space is so extremely important as we understand it to be, how come it all isn't unfolding, as quickly as it should be? How come why does it seem so difficult? And I think that there's a certain amount of what I call planetary inertia, right? So, and heck, we're creatures that have been living very happily on this planet for a very long time. So even though this evolutionary impulse is like pulling us up there, there's still a lot of inertia that's keeping us down here. So we need to overcome that inertia, and I feel that this is going to happen through an emergence of another endowment that I call the conscious evolver, and this is the individual. This is the individual, and these are the sages and the social reformers throughout history. These are the ones that that can see the future as it should be. They see the future as it could be, and then take decisive action to move us in that direction. That's why I think many of the people, Elon Musk, Robert Zubrin, a lot of people in the space movement, are these conscious evolvers that are really, I really do believe that they are in this category, and probably a bunch in this room. And so, let me see, how many? So, I'm going to leave you with a thought, and this brings me back to my opening story about my drive from DC, or back to DC from Florida. And it's really an exercise to say, to open or access this sort of conscious evolver dimension of ourselves. And what I'm recommending is that we take some time to ask ourselves, are we, how much in tune are we with this evolutionary impulse to expand into space? And are we doing the most that we can do with our particular talents, skills, and abilities? So the way to do that, a simple way to do that, is through, if you can, certainly if you could take a drive, that's a good way of doing it. Maybe it's taking a hike in the woods, walk on the beach. If you go on a retreat, or just be home alone quietly. And if you have a meditative practice or a religious practice, anything along those lines where you can, quiet your mind, empty your mind, and just ask yourself the question, what more can I do with the skills, abilities, and talents that I have that can help to move us closer and more quickly towards a space settlement future? Just ask that question, and let that question be there. Don't try to answer the question, you know, and it may, and just kind of wait for it to come to you, you know. It's and you don't, you know, it's not a spiritual or religious thing necessarily. It could be if that's where your orientation is. It could just be something that your unconscious mind is going to has been thinking through and sorted through and doing the analysis for you. So, you know, because the reason why I say this, because you know there's an imperative here that Kraft Ericke is talking about. You know, we don't really have that much time left, right? I take that back. Of course, we have plenty of time, but there's an imperative because of the risks, and they were brought up before, that we live in, right? So with our universe, we are a very fragile species living in a very hostile universe. If you Google extinction events, there's a list of 16 different ways that, you know, we could go extinct, you know, by all sorts of means outside the planet and inside the planet. So there is, you know, so we want to get urgent about it, because ultimately it's not going to happen unless and until we do, you know. Yeah, because it's going to be an exciting future, and we all have to play a particular part, a role, no matter where we are in life. So I encourage you to do that. Thank you very much. And I think we have time for a few questions. I'd love to get some feedback. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Have you had a chance to read this other non-space movement organizations? Have you had some feedback from them?
Not really. Not yet. Not yet. I would love to, but not yet. Uh-huh.
I've been to Winston,
Well, yeah. I mean, and that gets to where what more can you do, right? So it's each of us has, you know, not everyone is a public speaker. I'm certainly not a great public speaker, you know. So everyone has the you know what they can do from where they're at, you know. So we're all not engineers and scientists, and you know we all. I mean, or is, you know, is everyone here from the science? Is anyone here not from the sciences or not an engineer? Yeah, so not everyone's going to go work for NASA or for one of the contractors. And even if you're working for a contractor or NASA, you know, I mean, you have to question, you know, is what I'm doing here moving that forward? You know, I was happy working in Washington, working on space policy issues, and we were dealing with the space station back then. You know, space station program was crazy in the mid '80s. And you know, there was a lot of excitement around that. You know, NASA. I was the executive director of the Congressional Space Caucus. So NASA used to take. I used to get on these trips to go all around to all the NASA facilities and all that, and that was fun. But at the end of the day, it's like, well, how close are we getting to where we want to be, and what am I doing in that regard? So, I think that there's a lot there, a lot of opportunity there. So. Any other thoughts? Yeah, sure.
How do you think it would affect the obligation that you have to move out if there were advancements where they're doing the same thing, or they're doing it a million years in advance of us?
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah. I think that they're feeling the same. If what what I'm getting at here is anywhere near correct, I mean they're feeling the same thing we're feeling. You know, they're feeling the same evolutionary impulse to get off the planet. Now, how we're going to react, you know, collectively, you know, and how they're going to treat us, because, you know, they may feel you know, who knows what the, you know, they're coming with their own set of, you know, they're not going to, they may or may not be anything like us, you know, so I mean, hopefully, well, I'll put it this way, they're not going to deter the evolutionary impulse that we feel. So we're still going to, there's still going to be some people that are going to say, oh, you know, that 35%, right, that didn't want to go to the Mars. There's still going to be that you know, there's still going to be people that don't want to go no matter what, and there's going to be plenty of people that say that are going to sign up for Mars One, you know, for a one-way ticket if they can, you know. So I don't think that's going to change at all. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that those are dimensions that make up who we are as humans, all of humanity. Now, I mean, yeah, in the book, I explain that all of us have all 6 or 7 traits, and maybe there's 8. You know, maybe that's my next book. But the traits will present as you as an individual may present more strongly as a visionary, for example. You know, so or maybe a visionary and a builder. You know, so you got like an Elon Musk or something, or Henry Ford. You know, so you maybe have 1 or 2 strong endowments. So it's like human traits, but not quite human traits. So it's not about personality. It's about, you know, it's about how you're engaging in the world. You know, so. Mm-hmm. Possibly. I mean, obviously, you know, somebody said we're all like from the same, we're all part of the same family, right? So we all have the same DNA. So it's like what RNA switches go off in a person that makes them. Matter of fact, there was interesting book Beyond just came out. If you've heard of Chris Impey from Arizona, he talks about that we've identified the gene that makes us a wanderer, that makes us want to take risks, and that's uniquely human. And so we know what that is. So my suspicion is that they're gonna find the marker for these other endowments, you know, more or less, you know. And yeah. Well, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I mean that's definitely something to. Right, right. They're dealing with stresses, right? That they haven't gotten to the point of self-actualizing or just willing to let all that other stuff go. And you're right. Uh-huh. Yeah, no, but I see what you're saying. Yeah, I see what you're saying. You're representing people who really, the inventors are really the ones that are taking, the few that are really taking charge and stuff. Although, I mean, there's a lot of engineers and they're all problem solvers. They're all inventing, you know. I mean, if you create the right environment, you can get a lot of people doing that. But maybe the risk takers and the visionaries just tend to be a smaller subset. Yeah, true. I mean, I think there's a lot more. If you see, actually, I don't want to bore everybody, but the endowments are actually in pairs, and they're sort of like there's the masculine and feminine version, and so the masculine is the inventor and the visionary and the ones who are striking out, and then the builder and the settlers, have more of a nesting, right, nurturing dimension to them. So, I mean, if you're into that kind of stuff, hopefully, yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, you can't, right? Obviously, yeah, that's exactly right. And you haven't even read the book.